What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Original Nick Games. My name is Nick, and we are playing Chapter 1 of Mirt, Tales of the Cold Land. Tales of a Cold Land? I don't remember what I said. Remember what it was. It was only yesterday. He was still at home. How was it everything had changed completely, just like that? He had a sudden urge to stay. Too late for that. Yet for some reason he felt sure he wouldn't be coming back. He shook his head, trying to banish this strange conviction. Goodbye, homeland. Goodbye, childhood memories. He had no money, no food, not even a place to stay. In the end, he moved in with his brother and his wife, feeling very much like an uninvited guest. The feeling was clearly mutual. Then there was that call. A friend of his brother's, a former classmate. Anton didn't know him. He'd left university looking for a big paycheck and moved up north. Is that how? He'd never return. What a weird way to spell paycheck. That's freaking me out. It's a weird place. Kind of an insular little town. They've got some kind of secret project going on. They're hiring, you know. Insular? Is that a real word? Look, I never claimed to be a vocabulary master. A literary genius, as it were. Insular. Ignorant or uninterested in cultures, ideas, or peoples outside of their own. Oh, okay. So it's a closed-minded little town. Makes sense. Most of the details went straight over Anton's head, but he got the gist. He'd been a drain on his brother's finances for a long time, and he ought to be moving on. They've got 3 vacancies starting this summer. They're looking for new hires. He wanted me to come up there for the summer months. Then they could get somebody else. And Anton, the salary, he quoted a figure and I practically choked on my tea. Sorry. There's no whatever, and I'm seeing the waves form, and I gotta turn this down on my ears. It's ridiculously loud for some reason. Turn that down. You know I didn't graduate. Trust me, they don't care. You're sure I wouldn't be... I'm sure. Look, if you want to do this, it's pretty urgent. How urgent? The train leaves tomorrow, early in the morning. So he said yes. His brother was always the responsible one, where Anton knew he was still a child, even at 20. But this wasn't childish, right? Moving far away from home to work, and he wanted to do it. The next morning, his brother drove him to the station. The big clock read 5:15. White pigeons were swimming in the fountain. He stood on the platform, sports bag in one hand, the other holding a bag with his food. A fast train to Voronstovo, and from there to this place called Mirt. He fell asleep on the way and had a dream. It was a long time since he'd actually dreamed. There he was, flying, though he didn't have any wings. The wind was like someone slapping him on the face. His eyes were streaming, but it was amazing. Anton screamed with laughter until his chest hurt. Oh, okay. Then he woke up. What was it his mother used to say? A flying dream means you've grown up a little. Had he grown up then? Seriously? I've never had a flying dream. After being asleep, everything looked strange somehow, unfamiliar. Anton ate a sandwich and drank some tea from his thermos, hoping it would help him feel normal. No luck. Whatever. He could cope with that. He'd bought a book for the trip, some paperback detective novel. The whole thing only took him 2 hours. Then all he had left to do was stare out the window. The scenery grew monotonous, the endless steppe, the ruined buildings, and so many pine trees. It was the 4th week of June, the dog days of summer. Anton burned very easily whenever he went out. He sweated like a pig. See, that's because of the jacket, my dude. But here, even inside the train, it felt oddly cold, almost like late fall. The station was silent, shrouded in early morning mist. Anton stood in the doorway for the train and looked around him. "You must be Anton." The speaker sounded familiar. "Welcome. It's good to see you." Mr. Slav. Miss Slav? I can't. Slav. Mitsislav. Mitsislav. Gome nazai. The voice was the same, but Anton hadn't pictured him quite like this. He was tall, skinny, as sharp as a blade, with dark hair and pale skin. His cloudy gray eyes were trying to look cheery, but came across as more deep and sad. His lips were thin. His nose had plainly been broken once upon a time. I guess that. This Mislav wasn't particularly good-looking then, but he seemed a trustworthy sort. A clever man. Probably a book lover. How could you tell? But Anton could see it now. He'd be the one everyone in this place looked up to. The one they trusted implicitly. He'd always have the time for any of them. Or a word of advice. "Can we get a move on? It's quite a way back. Mirt is about two hours drive." Gosh. My dude, 2 hours drive. There was a car waiting for them, sparkling clean. The paint job barely even scratched. He'd been penniless student only yesterday. He never even dreamt of riding in a car like this. "I like the car." Anton tried to smile. "Took me a year to scrape up the money." Mislav answered brusquely. Then he looked somewhat sheepish. He opened the boot and helped Anton hoist his bags inside. For any of my American followers like me, I'm American. The boot is the trunk. That's what we call the trunk. Traveling light? Been there. I didn't have much with me either when I turned up. Weird. It wasn't that long ago, you know? But when I think back, it feels like a decade. They got into the car and slammed the doors in sync. Mislav switched on the radio. I need to learn how to say it. Mistislav. It sounded like an old tune. Pink Floyd, The Doors maybe. Oh, thank goodness. "You can call me Stiva, eh? Everyone else does." Thank you. Stiva, he said. Then they hand out pet names pretty easily around here. But Anton couldn't think of anything to talk about. He thought Mislav was probably older, given his voice. After all, his brother, who was the same age apparently, looked older still. It was hard to imagine Mislav was any more than 25, even though he seemed fairly worn down. Presumably he didn't sleep much. The other man broke the silence. Stiva. Or is that oh, that's another guy, never mind. Speaking of breaking the silence, can you please break the silence on this soundtrack, my dude? Anyway, it's good to have you here. You'll pick up some real experience, I'm sure. You finished your 4th year, right? Anton nodded. Steva watched him in the rearview mirror. Got any questions? Come on, ask me anything. Don't be shy. Oh, there we go. Now we're investigating. What about town? What about work? Don't ask questions. How'd you end up here? Let's ask him about him. It's all about him. It's not about us. How did you end up here? I was in university with your brother. You know that much. I left after the 3rd year. Never looked back. I majored in literature. Did he tell you? But when my father died, my stepmother sued me for the flat. That's the apartment for all of my American friends. Kicked me out on the streets at that. I had to bed down in the train stations. There was nowhere else I could go, or I could have gone. Lived off instant noodles. I found work of sorts, at least handing out leaflets. Then I heard about summer job in Mirt. So Steva is Miss Steva. I headed north with nothing but the clothes on my back, a couple of bread buns in my pocket, and ended up staying for 3 years. I did whatever. Anything they told me to, carrying the post, taking notes, all the donkey work. I had a roof over my head. They were feeding me for free. Not like I was going to complain. Before I knew it, they'd promoted me, a management position. And now the mayor's aside. Aide. Now the mayor's aide. My own flat, my own car even. He looked increasingly self-conscious, but it didn't seem to stop him talking. Got any questions? Come on, don't be shy. What about town? My brother said you never planned on staying, but it's been years. Do you like it that much? Honestly, it's hard to say. I hated it to start, but a strange place, Mirt. They'll welcome one person with open arms and the next, not so much. Either way, I didn't have much choice. I can't quit the contract. I had to tough it out. Man, I'm slow at reading. It got better over time. It was the people, I think. It's different when you're this deep in the back country. The old men run the cities, but it's the youth in charge out here. It's all students in Mirt, or the younger working class. Got any questions? Come on, ask me anything. I guess I'll ask him this one more question and then stop, because it's been going on for a minute. What's it like working here? You're with Misha. He'll treat you right. He's a good teacher, though I'm hoping you're not a dumbass, eh? He doesn't suffer fools gladly. Anyway, you get a salary and a room. That's free. Plus the food in the canteen is good eating. One thing, we don't really sleep at night around here. It's kind of a habit by this point. We generally doze off at daybreak and again after midday. I'll show you to your room, and when we get back... Oh, I'll show you your room when we get back. We'll drop in on the mayor, and then you can get some rest. You start work tomorrow. Why on earth did they no longer sleep at night? It was bizarre. Either way, but Anton certainly had no plans to change his usual routine. Got any questions? Don't be shy. Well, I don't have it. The trees either side of the road were higher and more numerous. Now this was a forest. Anton huddled into his coat and pressed his forehead to the window beside him to watch. It was freezing inside the car, though Steva hardly seemed to notice. He hadn't even buttoned up his jacket. Anyone miss you back home? Steva asked all of a sudden. Anton shook his head. No, not really. They fell silent as the journey continued. He was definitely a people person, this Steva, Anton thought, but also, paradoxically, somewhat shy. Maybe he just didn't like to impose. A good man, even so. Easy to talk to or get along with in general. Though Anton had found it easy to reach out to people before, only to realize the feeling wasn't always mutual. He became all too familiar with the feeling of being shunned, of a close friend turning back into an acquaintance and then a total stranger. He'd made no more friends at university. After a while, he didn't plan to make any there here either. After an hour's drive, they stopped by the roadside for a little while, then traveled on. All around them, Anton saw the same tall pines scratching at a colorless gray sky. Ooh. Finally, some music. It's been a minute. They never saw any signs or even a nameplate. He'd never found the place by himself. At last, they had reached the town, and Anton felt a thrill of excitement. This place was nothing like the concrete jungles he knew, the type of place he'd been trapped for 20 years. He could still see the forest wherever he turned, with narrow rows like a maze through the trees. Even where the houses weighted down the earth, there were trees. Pairs of tall, downy pines stood bent toward each other, like two people deep in conversation. Stiva turned down a side road, and Anton stared out the window. On either side, he saw houses, all of them very similar, not too big, modest and neat, colorful and bright, delicate hues. There wasn't a skyscraper in sight, or any kind of building that suggested the owner had a great deal of money and very little taste. Over there, Stiva was pointing at a shabby-looking building towards the end of the street. That's your office. Your room is this way, in the campus. That's what we call it, where the new people stay. The campus was 4 wooden houses, 2-story buildings, longer than they were tall. 3 of them had been built much the same, still looking new and sturdy, with several big windows on the front and a terrace where one might relax. The 4th house sat a little way apart. This one was new, too, but a little crooked, Anton thought, as if it hadn't been set quite right. No, he decided, it was straight, but his eyes kept telling him the place had been left unfinished. Stiva followed his gaze. That's where they've put you, number 1. It's a good house, honestly. It's got a lot of spirit. That sounds about right, Anton thought. It wasn't dead, this place, but it wasn't entirely soulless either. Somehow it made him think of fallen trees overrun the horde of bugs. Stiva showed him inside and headed for the first floor. Bedrooms are upstairs. Common rooms are down here, Stiva told him as they walked down the main corridor. Not that common, really, if you ask me. Anyway, your room is a bit of a personal space. You share the kitchen and the bathroom. It's the same for every 4 people. So, where are you? Over in the 3rd house, number 8. Drop in if you feel like it. If not, I'll see you at lunch. That's 2:30 or so. The canteen's not that far off. Ask the neighbors. They'll show you where to go. Well, why can't you, bud? Stevie handed over the key, then left. He seems as if he had places to be. Anton opened the door, looked around, then stepped over and laid his bags on the bed. The room was small, but it was clean and newly done up. There was a window, a lamp in the ceiling, and few items of furniture. As well as the bed, he saw a cabinet, a desk, and a chair. The walls and ceiling were white, but this was nothing like a hospital. If anything, it felt warm and comfortable. Whoa, did that just show up? Up here? Up there? Oh, it's him putting all this shit up. It scared me. He made the bed and stored his belongings in the cabinet, started to feel as if it was really his room. He heard a noise from the common rooms. Was that the neighbors? He wanted to say hello, but couldn't quite muster the courage. Would they think he was rude or too forward? He willed himself to go downstairs. Let's look at this, all this. Pages. It's a cat. Something. I don't know what the hell that is. Oops. Yeah, I don't know what that is. The shadows just got added. Did you see that? Bam. Shadow. Shadow. Oh, they just whited that out. It's weird. Good afternoon. There were two of them, one man in an overcoat sitting on the table, and the other standing, leaning against the back of the chair. Afternoon. The first man seated. He had spoken politely, and he studied Anton with a certain degree of caution. It's a long-ass chapter. The second, he was tanned with black hair, merely giving him a nod. You've just arrived, correct? The first man said, and continued talking without waiting for an answer. Let's just get it comfortable around here, because give me a minute. Just get comfortable. Yeah, we're getting comfortable now. Yeah, we're getting comfortable. And continue talking without waiting for an answer. Sit down. Okay. Anton did as he was told. It's Sasha. A hand was proffered across the table. Anton took it carefully. This man had a very firm grip and gave them his name. Grin, said the second man. He did not volunteer to shake hands. Oh, that's his name? Some tea, maybe? Sasha asked. He pushed back his chair and stood up from the table. He looked imposing, tall and broad-chested. A real bogatir, straight out of the old paintings. He even had the footwear, a pair of heavy ski boots. Sounds good. I'll have to look that up later, whatever. Then Grin answered as if for all three of them. It's cold enough my fingers are frozen solid. You came up from the south, right? How was it? He stared at Anton intensely with wide brown eyes. Warm? It's summer. I heard you don't get summer here. Nah. Well, it depends. A cup of herbal tea appeared in front of him. Anton usually took black, but he said nothing. The heat of the cup still warmed his hands. I don't understand what's going on. Why is such a... Where's the investigation? Please, I downloaded this for investigation. His housemate showed him to the canteen. The smell of soup and bread buns wafted across the campus, luring the inhabitants in much the same way honey tempted bees and wasps to settle. Anton counted perhaps 50 people. That wasn't so bad. Not too many of them were young ladies, though. Still, at least he could find Stiva in the crowd easily enough. Settling in, Stiva asked as they drew closer. He looks sad, Anton thought. Even though he's smiling, he's not smiling. Yeah, everything's fine. The crowd headed over to the canteen, moving like a school of fish. This was where Anton met him for the first time. Marquis, they called him. Or Marcus? Mark, I guess. It's Marcus. Marcus, why did I call him Marquis? That's stupid. Marquez! Marquis, whatever, I don't care. They called him. In the campus, or Mark Vladislavovich. Everywhere else in Mirt. He seems to be around 25, a tall man, though he didn't reach Stiva's height. Thin and flexible, almost serpentine. He had his long, fair hair tied up in a ponytail. There was a sense of something wrong about him. It's his eyes, Anton decided. His eyes. He met the other man's gaze head on and immediately wished he hadn't. A demon stared back at him. Anton quailed. Unable to stand another moment, look at something else, he told himself. His face. The man's skin was terribly pale. Was he a demon then? A vampire, perhaps? Anton thought. Good afternoon, Mark. This is Anton, our new bookkeeper. Stiva added helpfully. Welcome to the back country, Anton. Marcus Marcus said in an utterly humorless voice. This was the lord of the manor, Anton realized, the man who spoke with the word of God Almighty. Oh my gosh, are we seriously? I thought this was... Whoa! Should I break it here or not? It's been a minute. Yeah, if it goes on too much longer, I will cut it and you'll know. If not, I'll keep on going and you won't know that I cut it. Crowd sound effect 1. Evening fell from the sky like a woman's discarded velvet glove. Steva had been waiting. He went out onto the terrace and lit a cigarette. He watched in silence as the tables were arranged in the courtyard down below. Oh, I could do space, that's better. Let's put this over there. There we go. Good enough. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Earlier in the day, he'd almost quarreled with Marcus. That was careless. They were still on good terms, but how long would that last? What new idea would come to the man's sick head tomorrow? And there was the meeting he'd set up for tonight. Another rendezvous with someone he saw at the time. During the day, in the canteen, on the streets, and often these evening parties in the camp, yet they could talk only at night alone. Steva, you coming? Sasha called from down among the crowd. People scurried like ants from their houses to the tables and back, carrying food, plates, and bottles. I'm taking a walk. He threw his cigarette down from the terrace. Should be back in an hour. He walked away from the campus, heading towards the Moon Cafe. His feet brought him to First Street. He felt slight anxiety. He saw a familiar signboard, 4 white letters on a black background, though he couldn't make them out in the gloom. He glanced at both sides of the streets, and there was no one around. Carefully, he pushed the door open. Hey, this looks familiar. The doorbell rang. Steva was enveloped in a wave of dust and smoke. He walked inside, trying to watch where he'd put his feet. A dense fog spread over the floor. It was the same every time he visited. He saw the vague outlines of tables and the countertop along the bar. Smelt the spicy aroma of herbal tea. A wild music like a mantra floated through the rarefied air. He was dizzy almost at once, but it was a pleasant dizziness, as if he'd drunk a good wine. An old man from the neighborhood lay slumped over in the nearest table, sucking on a hookah, letting the smoke out of his nose. Stephen knew which table was hers. He could have found it with his eyes shut through muscle memory alone. The last one, over in the corner. No one else dared sit there. They'd heard the table was cursed. Tara wasn't afraid of curses, especially not when she'd cast them herself. It was so dark it seemed at first, as if the table was empty. But soon Steva could pick out the outlines of her face and the fall of her hair. You're on time as always, right down to the minute, she said softly. She was smiling, or was that just his imagination? He couldn't see. It's pretty dark, Steva said simply. Sorry, I put them out. I didn't want any light. Feel free to put them back on. He reached into a pocket for a lighter and set the flame to the eastern mosaic lamp that stood on each table. A dim, warm glow brought Tara's face out of the darkness. She looked pale and tired, like a mask made from wax framed by her black hair. She had cut her hair short, with bangs straight down to her eyelashes. It was so sleek it sparkled. Tiny points of light like stars in the night sky. in the glow from the lamp. Perched on her nose, she wore a pair of sunglasses with opaque black lenses, and two pendants hung around her neck on linen threads. It's pretty poetic, my guy. It's kind of freaking me out. She thrust the note into his hands as she passed him at dinner. Just a brief. The Moon Cafe, 2330, written on a yellow papered napkin. He knew he knew he'd be there. It's supposed to be she knew he'd be there. So, what happened? That's too hot. I'm not really sure. She closed her eyes wearily. I saw something. I haven't told Mark yet. I'll tell him tomorrow morning. Why tell me? Because it's about the new arrival. Anton? I don't know. But you've got the one, right? There's another one due tomorrow. Still, what did you see? It was a bird, wounded or dead maybe. There was a lot of blood. I went to her, picked her up. I held her close, cradled her in my arms and asked, "Who did this to you?" She told me, "The new arrival." You know I haven't had a vision in a long time. So you think the bird was me? It wasn't you. I'm sure of that much. But you have to take a closer look at these two. The new arrivals. You need to find out what's wrong with them. One of them, before that vision comes to pass. Understood. He folded his arms on the table and stared at his fingertips. Taro's hands were very close, small and pale. In a hurry, or do you have time for a coffee? Where would I be going in a hurry? He forced himself to smile. The waiters brought them 2 cups, strong coffee for Stiva and herbal tea for Taro. He never knew what to say when they ended up like this. He was supposed to start making small talk about random nonsense, life in the campus and all the stupid jokes people would told every day. Where would he begin with her watching him? And Taro was never embarrassed if he stayed quiet. She was one of those people who loved company, but could be silent for hours just staring at the table in the room with someone. Me too. There's another poetry evening on the campus tomorrow. I'll be there. She nodded. He knew she'd be there. Not the way she was now, but someone altogether more mundane, wearing that mocking smile and tight jeans and red lipstick. Once upon a time, he'd fallen for her, looking like that. But then he saw another side of her, the one currently sitting across from him, tired, morose, anxious, and this Taro seemed to be the real one, far more genuine, and the other just a mask that hid her true face. The real Taro came only out when there was 2 of them alone, when the 2 of them were alone. When they sat like this in Moon Cafe, in an abandoned cinema or on the beach, and once in the camp, in the small hours when everyone else had gone to bed. They drank wine together at empty tables and waited for the dawn. On that dreamlike morning, Tara had told Steve something that still made his hair stand on end at the mere memory of it. And then a month later it happened, but Stephen knew 2 things were certain. Firstly, at the end of July, there was a good chance something terrible would happen, in Mirt. And secondly, the predictions of Taro came true. So it is investigation, sort of. Guess we're gathering clues to see if some shit's gonna go down. There was another Taro who everybody knew, but who was utterly distant from Stiva, as if she came from another world. She always followed Mark around. Mark valued her, it seemed. But like a man might value an expensive watch. While he was in camp, she drank, read her daring poems, and couldn't stop picking arguments with people. What the? At first, Stiva had assumed she was flirting, but whichever was the real Taro, none of them loved him. Everything's up in the air today, and it's cold, Taro said, gazing into her cup. I like the cold. It clears my head. Not me. I can't stop thinking about it. I want to know what it means. Is it happening again, just like 2 years ago? Everything in ruins, everything we built, after all this time? And then what? He shrugged. It was a rhetorical question. She didn't expect him to contribute. Mark should listen at least, this time. He'll do what he's told. Last time I shouted. I roared like a damned bear. I hammered on his door, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't want to know. All that got him was 4 new graves in the cemetery. I always add words. It's weird. Oh, shit, that's hot. Steva looked away, unsettled by the anger in her voice. Don't do that. Please, listen to me. How did he look, the new arrival? Just ordinary? Like a regular guy, the same as me 3 years ago. I didn't see anything strange, but what do I know? I think you'd be better off talking to him. Is he in campus today? Where else would he be? Then let's go. She stood up so fast the lamp on the table shook. Chapter 2, please. Oh my gosh. The sky was dark as velvet. Even the roadside lamps were unlit. The moon overhead was the only light source. The two of them made their way to the campus. A pair of shadows, somehow unsettling, haloed in silver. What a weird song. Oh, there we go. They could hear the music before they arrived. A voice was raising in song. Not an especially good singer, but someone with passion at least. Did she change outfits, or did she just put the necklace on the outside? Or are they just not noticing? I don't know. Steva scanned the tables, crowded with people, heavy with bottles. I don't see him. Probably asleep. And there he was, Anton, standing on the terrace, silently observing the crowd. His face was in darkness, but Steva raised his hand, feeling certain the other man would have noticed the new arrivals. Just as he thought, Anton waved back and came down the outside staircase. All by yourself? Steva asked casually. Just that morning, the new arrival had been ordinary, a regular guy. Now he was a potential threat, some kind of predator lurking in the shadows at night. Anton only smiled and gave a shrug. But Steva wasn't about to back off. He had to get the other man to open up. Shall we find some company? This is Taro, by the way. From the tavern. Anton. So that's what Anton looks like? He's got gray eyes, my dude. He reached out a hand. Tara ignored the greeting and stared intently at the new arrival. Her dark eyes looked like coffee stains in half-light. Anton shrank into himself a little, plainly not expecting that reaction. He looked away, embarrassed. This awkward confrontation went on for a few more seconds. Taro looking at Anton, and Steva looking at Taro, trying to read from her expression what, if anything, she'd seen. At last she gave a smile and said, Nice to meet you. Anton sighed audibly in relief, and Steva followed suit. But did this mean Anton wasn't the threat? Was the newcomer Steva was due to see the next day? Or perhaps it was someone else who'd already arrived, who'd been in town for weeks now, even. The three of them approached the tables. There were four nearby set in a row. It seemed as if there was no place to be had along the benches, but someone shouted, "Hey, that's Steva! Come on, shift!" Three places opened up at once, as if by magic. A plastic cup appeared in front of him with a slice of lemon at the bottom. Someone filled it with vodka. Another of the guests passed him a peeled cucumber and a slice of cheese. Your attention, please. Sasha stood up, gripping his own cup, and cleared his throat. And he was the life and soul of the party. the hardiest worker and the most accomplished drinker of them all. We have another new arrival on campus, so let's give him a warm welcome, a toast to his health. A chorus of drunken voices began to shout. The crowd started clapping in their hands. Anton stood up, looking mortified. He was blushing so hard his cheeks were practically carmine. People clinked their glasses and drank, smiling bitterly. The next morning was heavy and dank with the mist of the river. Steve peeled his face from the pillow and washed at the sink. He had to head to the station and meet today's new arrival. What if he just didn't go? Whoever it was, they never get here unaccompanied. No one could find Mirt if they were specifically looking for it. Leave him at the station then. If he called the office telephone, Steve would just say it was the wrong number. Could he really... Let's... I don't know. Should... Let's save it here. Save one. Good. Let's save it here. And I will figure it out on the next episode of Original Games. So, this is long-winded, and we haven't even got to the investigation part. That's why apparently this game is an investigation-type game, and that's what I want to play. So, I guess we'll have to get there. I've been playing this game for a couple minutes now. A couple almost hour or something. So, for now, we're going to stop recording, and I will see you guys in the next episode of Original Games.